There's a difference between a person who has a job and a person who has a purpose. The person who has a job does what's required. The person who has a purpose does what's necessary. Martin Luther King Jr. did not choose his purpose. His purpose chose him. And everything in his life had been preparation for the moment that it arrived. My name is Colin Charles. This is Enoch Marketing, and we're getting into Law 13 of Robert Greene's Law for Power. This law is advance with a sense of purpose. Greene opens Law 13 with a distinction that most people spend their entire lives without making. And that is the difference between a goal and a purpose. A goal is something that you can achieve. A purpose is something that you become. Greene refers to it as a task, but for this argument, we're going to refer to it as the purpose. And the purpose is the work that feels uniquely yours. The calling that gives your life direction and meaning beyond the immediate reward. The thing that you would do even if no one was watching, or no one was paying attention, or no one was paying at all. Most people will never find their purpose. Not because they're incapable, but because they drift. They respond to external pressures. What pays money, what pays in the short term, what is expected, what is socially approved. And they optimize for the visible reward and never stop to ask what the visible reward is actually aiming for. Greene calls this the unconventional route to finding your purpose. It requires turning inward, examining not just what you are good at, but what you are drawn to. What makes time disappear? What connects your deepest experiences, including your suffering, to something that is bigger than yourself? Greene writes, "You possess a kind of inner force that seeks to guide you toward life's task, that what you are meant to accomplish in the time that you have to live. In childhood, this force was clear to you, and it directed you towards certain experiences and encounters that it deemed important. Over the years, the force tends to fade in and out as you listen more to others and lose hearing of your inner voice." Purpose is Greene's definition, is not the new job title. It's not the habit or the ritual. It is the convergence of everything you are. Your experiences, your trauma, your upbringing, your unique way of seeing the world, into one single forward direction that serves something beyond yourself. And Law 13 does not stand alone. It stands on the shoulder of every law that came before it. You cannot advance with a sense of purpose if you have not elevated your perspective, which was Law 6. You cannot advance with a sense of purpose if you haven't integrated your shadow into your personality, Law 9. You cannot advance with a sense of purpose if you have not confronted the fragile ego and would rather play it safe than risk the failure in service of something that is real, which is Law 10. And finally, you cannot advance with a sense of purpose until you've integrated the energies and the fullness of both masculine and feminine, Law 12. All of these laws were prerequisites to Law 13. His historical example is that of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I want to tell you all the King story the way that Greene tells it. Not as a symbol, as a monument, but as the human being who was formed year by year, experience by experience, for a purpose that he could not have fully articulated until it was time for him to be actualized. King was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. His father was a Baptist minister. His grandfather was a Baptist minister. And the church was not a career choice for the King family. It was the air that they breathed, the theology, the oratory, the moral framework. Martin Luther King Jr., had absorbed all of it before he had stepped into the role of a Baptist reverend. He was intellectually gifted. He entered Morehouse College at 15 years old and earned his divinity degree from Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania. And that was where he encountered for the first time the writings of Mahatma Gandhi and the concept of nonviolent resistance. That encounter changed everything. Not necessarily per se, but over time, as King turned Gandhi's ideas over in his mind against the backdrop of all that he had seen and felt growing up black in the American South. The humiliations, the violence, the structural degradation, something and all of that storm began to crystallize. And he earned a doctorate in systematic theology from Boston University in 1955. He was 26 years old. And he could have stayed in academia, and he could have taken a comfortable job at a church in the North, but instead he chose to throw himself back into the center of the storm by going back to Montgomery, Alabama. In December of 1955, Rosa Parks rose to give up her seat on the Montgomery city bus. The black community in Montgomery was ready, and they had been ready for years. What they needed was someone to hold the movement together and a catalyst to be able to bring the people into action. The someone that they needed was someone with a theological foundation to frame the terms and the anger that transcended the entire community and the actions that had degraded their dignity. They needed someone with the oratorical power to move the people and the strategic clarity to sustain a campaign under pressure. Enter Martin Luther King Jr., 26 years old. And he had been in Montgomery at this time for less than a year. And he did not seek the leadership of the Montgomery bus boycott, but he was called into it. And everything in his life, every sermon that he heard, every philosophical text that he had read, every injustice that he had witnessed, had been preparing him exactly for this season of his life. The boycott lasted 381 days. And there was 381 days of his community walking to work, carpooling, sacrificing convenience, enduring threats and violence. King's home was bombed. His family was threatened. He was arrested, I think it's something to the tune of 20 to 29 times. He was surveilled by the FBI, which at the time was the organization that considered him to be one of the most dangerous men in America. And here's the part of the King story that Greene emphasizes that most people don't know. And that is the opposition was not only on the far side of the aisle. There was opposition from within the black community. There were leaders who questioned Martin Luther King Jr.'s methods, who thought that nonviolent resistance was naive and cowardly. There were leaders in the black community who felt the movement was moving too fast or not fast enough. There were leaders who were threatened by King's rising prominence. And Martin Luther King Jr. was able to navigate all of it, not by suppressing the opposition, but staying anchored to the purpose. And he had found his purpose. And once any person finds their purpose and truly finds it, the external pressure loses its power to redirect them. Not because they become invincible, but because they stayed true to their cause. As Martin Luther King Jr. would say, the greatest tragedy is not death, but life without purpose. Now, King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. He was 39 years old. And in the 13 years of public leadership, he had changed the legal, moral, and political landscape of the most powerful nation on earth. Not because he was the most gifted orator or because he was strategically brilliant, though he was a great orator, and he was strategically brilliant. He was able to do so because he found his purpose and he pursued it with everything he had until the last day he had to pursue it. And that is what purpose looks like when it is fully exposed. Now, my thoughts. This part I chose not to script because I think we are living in the midst of truly historic times. And when we get down the line and our children and our children's children will look upon 2026 and see where we were and how we were operating, and they will study what we choose to do today. And that's not a political statement. That's just a statement of honest reflection. I look back at my own life and I came, honestly, I wouldn't say humble beginnings. We're far from trust fund babies, but my parents really did well in their efforts. We weren't fabulously rich. We were solid middle class. My parents worked very hard. They were very disciplined and had very clear visions for me and my family. We all went off to do all of these things. I graduated, went to the Air Force Academy, and then joined the military. And in the military, that was kind of the worst 7 years of my existence so far. And I've ended up moving to California, not according to my plan. My plan was to go be a pilot in the Air Force. And it didn't work out, primarily because I didn't want to do it and I couldn't hack it. I came out to California, fell in love with entertainment, fell in love with business, learned so much, ran out the rest of my time, and really learned a lot about leadership from the Air Force, mostly in forms of what not to do. And COVID happened. And when COVID happened, I took the time to reflect because, as they say, if you went through COVID, you either came out a chunk, a hunk, a drunk, or a monk. And I was a very hunky, chunky, drunky monk. But I began to think about what I really wanted in life. And I set out a vision at Disneyland, of all things, because I think that Walt Disney was onto something that even the company today has not fully actualized. And it's something that I think that no company in our late stage capitalism can actualize, because we've gotten so obsessed with the dollar that we've foregone the wellness and the life of our people. And I don't think that's a hard case to make. And if you think that, we are not sacrificing the good of our people, our children, our grandchildren at the altar of the dollar, then I thoroughly disagree with you. That's going to sound really weird coming from somebody who's in business. But I saw what Disney could do. I thought about what the company could have been if it stayed focused on people as opposed to being focused on money. And I realized that I had all of the resources that Walt Disney had at my age. And I could do it. And I began writing stories. And I began studying business. And I began to put the two of the things together. And I've tried businesses and failed like 9 times. But this 10th one is going great, by the way. And the thing of it is that I look back across my life where I find the masculine and the military and the discipline and the work ethic. And I see the feminine and the creativity and the collaboration and the synthesis that comes. And I see the opportunities that have been brought to me simply by moving out to California or joining the military. And I look back across everything that has happened in my life. And I realize that there must be a plan. This could not have been by accident. The same things that formed me when I was 3 years old, 5 years old, 13 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, are now all moving in the same direction towards one thing, one big, beautiful dream. And part of that is being able to navigate business and navigate in business in the light of knowing that we are in late stage capitalism and that capitalism is not nearly as much of the problem as greed is the problem that is choking all of us to death. And understanding business and seeing the possibility of what could be and having all of the connections, I realize that I have a purpose as well. And that purpose is to get into business and change the back-breaking work of business and take away the emphasis from pleasing the stockholders who aren't doing the work and taking all of this money and putting it in the hands of a few and loving people, loving your employees, taking care of them, answering their needs, being the leader who lifts his people up, being the person who ultimately changes the course of business in America, because I and many others like me have realized that the most important thing that this country has is its people. And in order to take care of the people, some sacrifices need to be made. And if the sacrifice is not becoming a billionaire wealthy or not even a trillionaire wealthy and saying I can live at this level if it means the 150 people around me have been lifted up. That is the revolution. That is the change that our country needs in the business and economic world. It needs a few people to stand up and say from their chest and with full conviction that I will go into business and I will not make a living, I will give life. And I will give life to my employees, and my employees will give life to the people that they serve, and we can fix this ecosystem if we are able to sacrifice the god of greed and money so that we may be able to give life back to the people. And that's purpose. That's why I always end up back in business situations. That's why I always end up in entrepreneurial endeavors. That's why I end up around so many people who are so creative. And my favorite company in the world is the Disney company. Not necessarily because of the IP, because you probably know what I think about the movies in the last 20 years. But I love the company because I see what they could have become if they did not sacrifice their own children on the altar of greed. This is the rebellion. And if you have a problem with that because you're some corporate bigwig who doesn't give a shit about your people, know that there are many, many more people like me. We have a generation of people who are going to stand up, eventually growing up and taking the positions to fix what you did wrong. And I'm happy to be one of the vocal members of this rebellion. And that's purpose. I digress. That was completely off script. I don't know what was on the teleprompter. So why should you care? So let's bring it back to your gym. Most CrossFit gym owners started their gym for a reason that had little to nothing to do with revenue. They started it because they experienced something in a CrossFit gym that changed them. Something that they wanted to create that experience for other people. Maybe they wanted to be healthier. Maybe they wanted them to have a creativity or a community. That's purpose. But when the business arrived, the lease, the equipment, the insurance, the scheduling, the social media, the ads, the member complaints, the staff drama, all of that, then that person who started the gym to change lives is now spending 80% of their time managing logistics. The minutia has consumed the mission. And Greene calls this the danger zone, the daily grind that puts your attention away from the larger arc. The tactical tends to overwhelm that which makes you inspired, in spirit, inspired. And there's a slow drift away from your purpose, but towards mere survival. And the gym owner who loses their purpose does not close their gym immediately. They become a manager instead of a leader. They optimize instead of inspire. They retain members instead of transforming them. And the community can feel it. They can't always articulate it, but they feel the difference when an owner who is leading them from purpose becomes someone who's just running a business. Purpose is not the goal of building a great gym. Purpose is the reason the great gym is worth building. And the application is not just for the owner, and it's for the coach on the floor as well. The best coaches in CrossFit history are the ones who are not the ones with the most credentials. They're the ones who understood that their coaching was not just a serviceful transaction. It's a calling. And every athlete they worked with was a contribution to something that they could feel and not always articulate. The athletes then serve the purpose of the coach, and the coach serves the purpose of the athletes. Think about the coach who is meant to be that athlete's coach. Not just any coach, the right coach. The one whose specific combination of experience and empathy and method was exactly what that specific athlete needed at that moment in their life. And every session they share is just like a note. Every interaction you have, every single moment that builds to this great crescendoing epic is a note in the symphony of success. Every day is. So you have to play every note right in order to play the song correctly, just like you have to spend every day, every interaction, everything fueled with the purpose that encourages success down the road. It's not an easy process, and it's not short. It takes a long time. It compounds, and every athlete and every coach, the transformation carries something of that purpose, and it carries it into the rest of their lives. It carries it into their family, into their community, into their world. Your gym is not a business that happens to change lives. It is a purpose that happens to require business skills to sustain it. And keep that distinction clear, because I'm going to do a quick rant. Keep the distinction clear. It'll save you the days in the business when the business feels impossible. Purpose is the calling. It is what makes life worth living. Business is the vehicle to fulfill the purpose. When business becomes the purpose, be sure the collapse is imminent. The soul will leave, and your entire quality of life and that of the people around you will suffer. Purpose is the aim. Business is the vehicle. Now, let me recap. Greene calls it the purpose. The work that feels uniquely yours is the convergence of your life experiences, your trauma, your upbringing, the unique way of seeing into a single forward direction that serves something greater than yourself. Martin Luther King Jr. did not choose his purpose. He was transformed by it. Every experience, every text, every injustice he witnessed, every theological argument absorbed, all of it was preparation for the moment that he could not have planned, though that moment was 13 years. He pursued that purpose until the last day that he had to pursue it. And in those 13 years, he changed the world. And purpose stands on the shoulder of every law that came before it. The elevated perspective, the shadow, the secure ego, the whole self, all of that builds into living out into your purpose. And the danger is always the minutia, the daily grind that consumes attention without pointing towards anything larger. the tactical can overwhelm that which inspires you. And that is why, without the vision, people perish. Every experience that you have ever had is pointed towards something. Every failure, every loss, every unexpected turn, every person you have loved, every cause you have ever cared about, all of it is pointing towards something. The question is, do you know what that something is? My name is Colin Charles. This is Enoch Marketing, and we'll see you next time.